This podcast is brought to you by New Life Ministries.
Welcome to the Every Man's Battle podcast. I'm your host, JJ West. On this podcast, you will hear honest conversation and encouragement for living a life of sexual integrity. Let's get to today's episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Every Man's Battle podcast. I am JJ West. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the Central Florida area. I get to serve as the host of the podcast, and I get to present at the Every Man's Battle Intensive, as well as the marriage workshop for New Life Ministries. And I get to work with individuals and couples dealing with sexual integrity issues. It's a joy and a privilege. And I'm once again joined by Doug Barnes. Hey, Doug.
Hi, JJ. Again, happy podcast day. We love these days, right?
Podcast day. Yeah.
I'm a licensed professional counselor from Texas, and I've worked with the Every Man's Battle Intensive for about 19 years, 2006. So somewhere in there, early 2006. And so, as you said, it's a privilege and honor to get to just represent New Life Ministries and the Every Man's Battle Intensive well. So I'm looking forward again to the continuation of what we talked about last week.
As Doug just mentioned, right, this is going to be part 2 of a 2-part series on neurobiology and brain chemistry as it relates to our sexual arousal, as well as addiction. Like what's going on neurochemically? We started the discussion last week. We kind of laid the framework, right? The groundwork. We laid the groundwork for why is this discussion important? Why are we having the discussion? Why do it here on the podcast as opposed to just at the workshop? And we got into the topic of whether or not sex addiction or addiction to pornography is even a real thing. Like we started down that path, and we talked a little bit about it, but I wanted to pick up the conversation there because there was a few things that we didn't get to in last week's episode that I think are going to be important. One of the things I think is going to be helpful to talk about is the difference between misuse versus abuse. It might be helpful to look at this from the perspective of like drug misuse or drug abuse. So you could misuse a substance for which it's not intended, it's not its effective treatment. It doesn't work. You're not going to really usually suffer too many harmful effects from it. But I'm misusing the drug versus when I'm abusing a drug, I'm really taking a drug as medication or to help solve a problem for which is not well suited, and to do so in a way that's harmful. So in the vernacular that we use at the EMB workshop, we talk about how we try to meet legitimate needs in illegitimate ways. So we're trying to use our sexuality to meet a legitimate need for intimacy, connection, meaning, self-esteem, whatever. But we're using our sexuality in a way to try and treat another problem, which it wasn't designed for, right?
Right.
And we're doing it in an illegitimate way. So that's really the difference between misuse and abuse. Abuse is when I'm doing that at a level where it's harmful to myself or it's harmful to those around me. And oftentimes you'll see the impact of abuse show up in terms of dependency. You might have a physical dependency, like your body comes to rely on the presence of that thing in order to continue to function. This is a little bit more difficult to see with sexual addiction, but where a good example, I think, would be the guys who've looked at pornography for so long, for so many years or possibly decades, that they're unable to have normal intercourse with another person without that visual stimulus of pornography somewhere in the room as a way to arouse them, because sex with another person is not arousing enough. So they've become physically dependent on pornography, right? You could also have a psychological dependency, repeated use of a substance, or in our case, a behavior. That repeated use of the behavior, the person actually starts to believe that they need to have it in order to function. Like their brain is saying, "I have to have this. My life only makes sense." It's kind of like what we talk about at the workshop, where we say, for a while I'm trying to fit my addiction into my life, but eventually now I'm trying to fit my life into the addiction. Like the addiction overtakes my life. So that's a psychological dependency. I I can't see myself outside of my dependence on this, in this case, the mood altering behavior of sexually acting out, right? And so when you have that dependency, you end up developing what's called a tolerance, right? You either need more of the same drug of choice in order to try and reach that first high, or you have to branch out into harder drugs of choice in order to try and reach that same high. And you can see it certainly with drug addiction, where someone may start off with pretty low level, if you will, drugs, but they escalate into harder and harder drugs because they're trying to chase that high. With pornography and sexual acting out, it might be that I start with, I'm looking at porn every once in a while for a few minutes at a time, to I'm looking at porn every day and I'm looking at it for hours. Or it might branch out into harder drugs, like I'm engaging in prostitution, I'm engaging in unprotected sex, I'm engaging in voyeurism, or exhibitionism, illegal activities, right, that I could get arrested for, I could, pay fines for. I'm engaging in more and more dangerous behavior as a way to try and increase the mood alteration, right?
Right. I mean, you talked about tolerance. So could that also play into the lines we said we would never cross?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah. Because that thing that I used to say, okay, here and no further, right? I'm only going to look at pornography. I'm not going to do anything else. Oh, but then the pornography doesn't quite do it for me. So now I'm going to add in masturbation, but I'm only going to do pornography and masturbation. It's not going to include anybody else. But my heart is still longing for actual physical interaction with another person, and so now I'm gonna move on to prostitution or a massage parlor or a strip club or whatever, right? I keep moving the line out further and further and further, and then it's okay. Now I'm with the prostitute, but now I'm trying even more forbidden behaviors because I'm looking for that high, and I don't get it from the stuff that I used to do.
Right. So let's be clear that not everyone, that's not a progression for everyone, but that is a natural
Correct.
progression that does occur. I mean,
Correct.
because I've had some spouses in my office say, well, oh my gosh, it's only a matter of time before and it's like, wait a second, hold on, tap the brakes.
Right.
No, it's not.
Right.
No, it's not. But
Correct.
could it happen? But it could happen to anybody in any of those areas, whether it's drugs or alcohol or gambling or food or whatever. So just to make that clear, as we move forward here, as we go on.
Yeah, it doesn't just have to be I'm going to harder drugs. It can be I'm taking more and more of the same drug, trying to get so I might, I'm start off with high. A little bit of pornography, and then it's more, and then it's more, and then it's more, and then it's more, and then it's more. Or it's I do a little bit of pornography when I'm home on the weekends, and then it's now I'm doing it in the evenings during the work week, and now I'm doing it at work, and now so there can be a progression, not just in the kind of drug where I'm going to other acting out behaviors, but how much I'm doing the acting out behavior of my choice
within the drug. Mm-hmm. Right.
Correct.
Right. A potential is there, but it's not everybody. Not everybody does that. So, all right. So let's move on here. So how would somebody know if they're really addicted versus, as you talked about the misuse, and abuse? Mm-hmm. How would somebody know if they become addicted, or if it's like, quote, a normal user?
Correct. Yeah. Good question. So I think it starts with, the excessive personal use. So if I am acting out in non-work related ways, I don't know how many people would have work related ways of using pornography or whatever, but I'll just say, if I'm using my sexual acting out behavior more than 20 hours a week, that's excessive, right? As opposed to someone who is occasionally perhaps looking at pornography. That's a pretty clear indicator of a compulsion, a compulsive behavior. There might be neglect or avoidance of previously rewarding activities. Like you used to love going mountain biking, but now every time your buddies invite you to go mountain biking, oh, I can't, I'm busy, but really I'm just spending the weekend looking at porn. Or maybe, you used to love photography, but now all your sexual acting out has overtaken your life and you don't do the things that you used to enjoy. There could be an experience of depression. Sometimes it's short term, sometimes it's long term, but where you feel actual, low mood, low energy. Oftentimes that's a result of the guilt and shame of the sexual acting out. There can be a pursuit of a high that you've experienced while online. So you're what we talked about, the tolerance, right? Like I'm still chasing that high. There can be a false perception that's what intimacy looks like, and so now I'm trying to manufacture it or replicate it in my personal life. So the things that I've viewed online or in magazines or whatever, I'm saying, oh, that's what it looks like. So now we're gonna replicate that in the bedroom, right? Sometimes it can be where if I notice that I'm turning to my sexual acting out behavior, whatever it is, whether it's porn or strip clubs or whatever, I'm turning to it to resolve either sexual difficulties or emotional difficulties, and then I'm releasing my frustration in my sexual acting out. That could be frustration from perhaps you're in a marriage that is sexless or that there's very little sexual interaction and you're angry and frustrated, and then you go to your sexual acting out as a way to resolve that frustration that you feel, something along those lines. But it doesn't have to be sexually related. It could be even a frustration that you feel because I don't know, the kids always want money and they never want to spend time with you, or the boss thinks you're the worst employee in the firm or whatever, right? And so I'm using my sexuality to resolve those frustrations. And then finally, if you're experiencing some sexual problems, if you've got a history of sexual problems, whether that's premature ejaculation, delayed ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, you've contracted STDs, they're not in and of themselves. Any one of those things isn't an automatic. But when you start to look at all these things building up, you go, oh, there's some indication here that this isn't just normal activity, normal behavior. These are indications that I've got a problem.
Okay. Wow. Okay. That's good. That's really good.
Don't know the answer? New Life can help.
My 15-year-old niece is cutting.
I'm confused on what I should do.
I have an eating disorder.
I'm trying to find help.
I have a question about my 15-year-old stepson.
I need to learn how to connect with people.
Call us at 1-800-229-3000 Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, and our expert team of counselors and psychologists can answer your questions about your life. 1-800-229-3000.
So you've talked a little bit about some of the neurobiology. Let's switch to the neurochemistry.
Yeah.
So can you give us an overview of what's really happening neurochemically when a man looks at pornography?
Yeah. Good question. Okay, so we're going to look at this. I say it at the workshop all the time. We're looking at it from like a 50,000 foot view, right? Yeah. Like way super simplified because one, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't play one on TV. And so I have a layman's understanding of this as much as I can. And because it's so complicated. I mean, we're going to again be talking about it in an oversimplified view, but just to help us all be able to comprehend some of it. Okay, there's a lot of things going on neurochemically. Whenever someone is engaged sexually in some way, it starts off so the brain is composed of three regions: the hindbrain, the midbrain, and the forebrain. The hindbrain is like the part of the brain that's just keeping us alive. You're breathing, your heart's beating, you eat and drink, you're functioning, right? So it's keeping you alive. But the midbrain is the section of the brain that is responsible for the drives. So, for instance, the drive to eat, the drive to drink, and the sex drive are all located in the hypothalamus, and that's the part of the brain that's saying, okay, this is important, this is necessary for your for your survival, right? If I don't eat, I die. If I don't drink, I die. And so it starts to almost feel like if I don't have sex, I die. No one's going to die if they stop having sex, but it starts to feel that way kind of neurochemically in my brain, that my brain's going, this is really important. And so the hypothalamus lights up whenever there is some sort of arousal, some sort of sexual activity happening, whether it's happening in front of me or I'm engaged in it. That part of my brain, the hypothalamus, lights up, and it starts pumping out dopamine, right? And there's a particular section called the ventral tegmental area. We'll just refer to it as the VTA. Okay, that's part of that's in the hypothalamus. And the VTA, man, it starts manufacturing dopamine and it's shipping it out to the brain. Okay, tons of dopamine. It's shipping it out to these different areas of the brain, and it's saying, this is really important. Pay attention to this. In the same way that if I was really, really thirsty and there was a glass of water, the VTA would go, oh, dopamine, drink that water. That's important. You need that, right? Okay, so my brain is sending out this dopamine, flooding my brain with dopamine, saying this is important. Pay attention to this. So if because as a guy, I tend to be visually stimulated. If I see nudity on the screen, in a magazine, someone walking by, strip club, whatever, it activates that part of my brain that goes, hey, sex is important. Here's some dopamine. Pay attention to this. And hormonally, it starts sending testosterone. Okay, so, and then it sends it from, it's going everywhere. Again, this is super simplified, but it goes from the VTA, from the hypothalamus, it sends it into the nucleus accumbens. And for men, when our nucleus accumbens lights up because we're sexually aroused in some way, it's flooding the nucleus accumbens with both dopamine and testosterone. And the nucleus accumbens goes, okay, guys, this is important. We should act on this. we should take advantage of this opportunity right now. Now, it hasn't yet gone into the forebrain, which is the prefrontal cortex, right? The part of my brain that's responsible for decision making. There's part of my brain that goes, okay, is this acceptable? Is this safe? Does this make sense? Should I do this? Right? I haven't even gotten there. It's just in the interface between the hypothalamus and the forebrain in the nucleus accumbens saying, yeah, this is good. This is important. Let's act on this. Okay. So my brain is being flooded, right? Dopamine, man, listen, dopamine does a lot of things in our world and a lot of things in our brain, right? The two things that are most important, I think, for our discussion is that it drives satiation and it drives novelty. Okay.
Right.
Satiation is, man, it's like tunnel vision, right? It's like the blinders on the horse, right? It's tunnel vision. Go get satisfied, make this happen. Nothing else in the world matters, right? And when we're looking at pornography or we're acting out sexually outside of the way God designed it, it's not just a little bit of dopamine, it's a flood of dopamine. And so as that dopamine is flooding my brain, it's creating this tunnel vision. So all I see is the thing that I'm after. Okay, now here's where everything gets a little bit crazy and a little bit squirrely, because someone in my life could hear that. An important person in my life could hear that and go, oh, so you're saying you didn't have a choice? Oh, so you're saying it was out of your control? Okay, but we're not saying that. We're not saying that. Okay, it hasn't reached the forebrain yet to make the decision. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Once it reaches the forebrain and I have to make a decision, I'm absolutely responsible for the decision I make. Okay.
Good. Yeah.
And it's also important to recognize that I have trained my brain through repeated misuse or abuse or addiction. I've trained my brain to only respond to like a bucket full of dopamine as opposed to a little drop of dopamine. God designed us, our original factory setting, if you will, is that we would respond to a small amount of dopamine in interacting with our spouse. And like, oh, wow, she smiled at me. That felt good. She brushed up against me in the kitchen. That felt good. And there's a little bit of dopamine, right? And I'm responding to that. But through repeated looking at pornography, through repeated going to strip clubs, massage parlors, prostitutes, whatever, I've kind of reset my brain to only respond to like these buckets. And when those buckets are hitting, it's very hard to make a good decision. So I'm actually responsible for all the decisions that led up to my brain functioning the way that it does now, right? So I'm not taking away responsibility on the part of the person whose brain is malfunctioning at this point, right? But that's what's happening neurochemically, is that my brain is saying, go get satisfied. And it's also driving novelty, which I'll just touch on real briefly, is that novelty is like something new, something different. And that's why we build up a tolerance, right? Is that we're chasing something new, something different. And so it's the experience of you meet someone and you've never had any kind of sexual relationship with this person, and you might automatically be wondering, what are they like in bed? Or you're watching the evening news and they go and they say, oh, so and so, celebrities' nude photos were leaked, and there's part of you that goes, oh, I have to go see that, right? Like there's something, that's novelty, that's dopamine dripping in my brain saying, go experience something new, something different than you're used to, right? So I know that's a lot. And that's like half.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
So this dopamine is released. It acts like a signal that it teaches, what's important, what to pay attention to, what's going on in the environment that is significant, right? It's giving me that tunnel vision. So I'm focused on the image, or I'm focused on the person, or I'm focused on the sound. Like if I'm listening, if I'm doing like audio stuff, right? And as I said before, these three primary drives, right? Eating, drinking, sex, they're all located in the same place in this specialized nuclei cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus. So again, it neurochemically and emotionally feels like this is part of my survival, right? It feels that important. It feels that significant. And here's the other thing. As I'm experiencing this arousal, as I'm experiencing this sexual stimuli, it's creating tension in my brain that wants to be resolved. But the only way it gets resolved is through orgasm. And so it's driving me toward orgasm. It's driving me either toward having sex with the person or engaging in masturbation to the point of ejaculation. But if it doesn't get resolved by that, I'm left with all this tension in my brain. If it does get resolved through orgasm, here's what's really interesting to me anyway. Again, I'm nerding out on this. So the amygdala, the part of my brain that tells me to be afraid or tells me to be anxious or whatever, that part of the brain, when after ejaculation and all of these chemicals flood my brain, the amygdala shuts down. And so I feel like euphoria. I feel peace. Like everything is good in the world, right? Because my amygdala is like, my up to that point, the amygdala is like, oh, tension, we've got to resolve this. This tension doesn't feel good. We need to get rid of this tension. And that could be both the sexual tension as well as the anxiety of, am I going to get caught? Is something bad going to happen? Is someone going to walk in? Whatever. So like my amygdala is like firing. And then at ejaculation, the amygdala goes, everything's good. Nothing to worry about here. Take your life of ease. Right? And that feels good. We love that feeling of total bliss, right? And then after a little while it fades, and then we go, oh, I need that again, right? Because the world keeps happening to me, right? Tension keeps coming at me through the world, and I go, oh, I know a way to resolve this.
Right. So is that that process that you described, is that what takes us from behavior to addiction?
Yeah, if you do that enough, then it does, because not only am I chasing that high, I've also neurochemically, I've attached a different stimulus to my sexuality. So again, the way God designed it was I would experience some attraction to my spouse, some connection and intimacy with them, and that leads me to want to engage sexually. We engage sexually, that leads to that ejaculation, where I feel warm, fuzzy, love, connection, but I also feel that, the amygdala goes, oh, everything's good now, right? That's the way God designed it. Okay. But what we do is we attach a different stimulus to our sexuality. And most of the time that's going to be things like, negative emotions. I feel sad. I feel angry. I'm disappointed. I'm grieving. I feel ashamed. I'm embarrassed, right? And we go, oh, I don't like that feeling. And so I'm not saying we do this logically, by the way. This is kind of happening behind the scenes. But something in our brain goes, oh, I don't like this feeling of embarrassment or this feeling of sadness. And I know that when I engage sexually and ejaculate, I'll have that release, and that'll give me an escape. That'll allow me to feel that release. The tension will go away. And if we do that enough, there's in neuroscience, there's a thing called the Hebbian principle, Hebbian. The Hebbian principle says basically when neurons fire together, they wire together. So the more I do something, the more I'm going to do it. And so you start with just a little stream, right, that's running through. But as more and more water goes down that stream, it cuts a groove, and that groove gets deeper and deeper, and eventually you've got a canyon. And that's what's happened neurochemically in our brain is we've done it so many times that, man, the moment I feel sad or the moment I feel disappointed or angry or not enough or I don't mean enough or I'm not good at this or whatever, man, my brain is already off to the races, and I'm already plotting how I'm going to act out sexually in order to get that high so that I don't have to feel this.
Wow, that is super informative. Informative. All right, so for the sake of time, let's sort of wind this down. So give us some key differences between men's and women's brains when it comes to viewing and or responding to anything sexual stimuli between the two.
Yeah. And so in answer to that, I would say that there's tendencies of male brains versus female brains. It's not across the board. So it's not like 100% of men respond one way and 100% of women respond another way. It's the vast majority of men respond one way and the vast majority of women respond another way. But saying that, most men's brains are designed in such a way that we organize information kind of in a one-track compartmentalized way. Goal-oriented, tend to be very goal-oriented and tend to be very visual. Now, I know that there's some writing out here in the last couple of years. There's been some writing and some claims that there's no difference between men's and women's brains, that we're not different in terms of how we're visually stimulated. I don't think that that's true. I don't believe that that's true. I believe that we are. That men are more wired to respond visually based on the way our brain is just naturally developed. Now, that doesn't mean that I get a pass, that somehow I'm it's okay for me to ogle women or to look at pornography or whatever because my brain is more visually stimulated. No, I have to just be aware that I'm more susceptible to that temptation. And so I need to be more on guard, right? But because men's brains tend to be more visually stimulated, man, pornography hijacks our brains in ways that it doesn't hijack a female brain on the whole. When a man is viewing pornography, they'll experience that increased anxiety and tension. It results in an increase, like I said, in the amygdala activity. And when that happens, it's the same tension that could show up if like men were shown statements of their girlfriend, fiance, or spouse cheating on them. They would experience that same kind of tension in their amygdala. So when they're viewing pornography, they're experiencing that kind of tension, and they're looking for the resolution. As I said before, I think it's when the nucleus accumbens lights up after the VTA has flooded that area of the brain with dopamine and testosterone. Well, one, women's brains don't have that flood of testosterone, and two, the nucleus accumbens when they're either engaged sexually or there's someone they're perceiving to be sexual around them, their nucleus accumbens doesn't light up. Okay, now make of that what you will. It doesn't give men a pass to behave however they will, but it just means that there's kind of this intrabrain war that's going on for men when the temptation to view pornography or act out sexually, whatever it is, strip clubs or massage parlors, whatever. There's an intrabrain war going on for men that isn't happening for most women, right?
Right.
And then I would say because again we tend to be that compartmentalized, we can end up focusing that when that dopamine causes that tunnel vision. Our brains are already kind of hardwired to respond to that, like, okay, it's just this goal-oriented, tunnel vision, one track, and I forget about the rest of the stuff in the world around me. I forget about the impact that it's going to have on my spouse. I forget about the impact it might have on my children. I forget about what impact it might have on my job or whatever, right? And so, again, it's not an excuse. It's just explaining that my brain is kind of prepared in a way that I'm more susceptible to that environment, which is why it's so important that I avoid it at all costs.
Wow. That's really good. One of the things I was thinking of, and I know we need to wind this down, but one of the things I kind of put together was just because I'm wired that visually doesn't mean I can't retrain my brain through the things we call self-control and
that's right.
The fruit of the spirit, right? That I get into where am I and my agency to make those decisions, even though and like you were saying, I can't use that as an excuse to look, even though my brain might be wired to go that way, but that doesn't mean that I'm a robot and it's going to be automatic. I can retrain my brain to act with integrity and purity and honor, not just give in to the animalistic piece of my upbringing and my creation.
Well, and this is why at the workshop we talk about doing a 90-day reset, because my brain, because I've developed that, that river's been running through, that neural pathway's been running through my brain. It's got a deep groove, right? It's that 16-lane superhighway. And so I need to actually abstain from sexual behavior for a lengthy period of time, usually about 90 days, because that's what most neuroscientists will tell us. It takes about 90 days to break an old habit and establish a new one. This is why all the 12-step groups, if you go to a 12-step group, one of the first things they're going to tell you is you have to do 90 and 90 meetings in 90 days, right? Okay.
Yep.
Because there's a neuroscience behind that's what the brain needs to reset. So if you have trained your brain to respond visually to pornography or strip clubs or whatever, you're probably going to need to consider doing a 90-day reset in order to help your brain learn how to respond differently, so that it's not an automatic. If I'm feeling low and the Playboy channel's free this weekend, HBO's free this weekend, I'm going to watch stuff that I know I shouldn't. No, I'm going to train my brain to think differently.
Right. Good stuff. Really good.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
And,
man,
we've only scratched this much.
That's right. We got a thimbleful today, which is good, but it was good. It was a good thimbleful. It was. And listen, guys, we know that this isn't going to give you all the answers or explain everything, but what we want you to do is dig deeper. So if you've never read Wired for Intimacy, go get yourself a copy. I know it's available on the New Life website. If you go to the resources, you can order it there. But grab a copy of Wired for Intimacy. Go to the intensive so that you can learn more, and not just, oh, this is an interesting fact, but how do I now apply what I'm learning to retrain my brain? Like that,
Right.
There's some significant steps that I got to take in order for that to happen. It doesn't happen automatically. And it doesn't just happen from, oh, well, I'll stop looking at pornography. That's a good start, but that's not enough. And so
Right.
read Wired for Intimacy, go to the workshop, use the code EMBPOD to get the discount, the $100 off your registration fee. But also talk about the podcast. Talk about it with some of your friends. Maybe it's your small group at church. Maybe it's some guys from your small group at church. Talk about the podcast and talk about how do we as men respond to this information in a way that honors God, honors our spouses, and honors our own hearts and our own design. Have those conversations. Start this. You might be the one who has to start the conversation because chances are no one else is. So step up. But as we do that, we're going to be transformed. We can't do it alone. We got to do it in the context of community.
Yeah.
Doug,
Good words.
Great to be with you today.
You too, JJ.
That was a lot of information.
It's a lot. Good
I think
stuff.
we need to wrap up.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Well, hey,
least
guys,
today.
thanks for listening. I'm so glad that you're, again, along for the journey. Until we meet again, until we listen again, until we speak again, let's continue to walk in integrity.
Thanks for listening. This podcast is just one of the many ways we can encourage and help you. If you're looking for more help, visit us at newlife.com or call 1-800-NEW-LIFE. Please remember to review, like, and share the podcast as it helps others find us. If you have a comment about this podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at embpodcast@newlife.com. See you next week.